The moment I heard the door click shut, a shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't fear. It was something much more complicated, something I'd never felt before. I told myself it was the chill of the night air sneaking in, but deep down, I knew the truth was far more unsettling. That night, everything changed. I was staying at my sister's house for the weekend. My husband was away on a business trip, and she'd begged me to visit to help her with a few things around the house. It seemed like a harmless plan. Family, good company, and a change of scenery. What I didn't expect was that her son, my 19-year-old nephew, would be staying there too. When I arrived, he greeted me with a grin that was different. Not in an inappropriate way, but in a way that made me notice him, really notice him, for the first time. He was no longer the awkward teenager I remembered. He was tall, confident, and magnetic. It was unsettling, and I brushed it off as a fleeting thought. But as the day went on, I found myself drawn to him in ways I couldn't explain. The way he moved, the way he laughed, the way he looked at me. It all felt charged. I blamed it on my imagination. After all, I was happily married, and he was my nephew. There was nothing to this, right? That night, my sister asked me to share a room with him. Their guest room was under renovation, and he'd insisted it was no big deal. "It's just for one night," she said, completely unaware of the storm brewing inside me. Reluctantly, I agreed, convincing myself that I was overthinking everything. The room was small, with a single bed pushed against one wall and a mattress on the floor. He took the floor without hesitation, leaving the bed for me. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, trying to calm the chaos in my mind. But it was no use. Every breath he took, every rustle of the sheets, felt amplified in the silence. At some point, I drifted off to sleep, only to wake up hours later. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of moonlight streaming through the curtains. I turned my head and saw him lying there, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. He looked so peaceful, so vulnerable. And then it happened. I don't know what compelled me, but I reached out, letting my fingers graze his hand. His eyes opened instantly, locking onto mine. There was no hesitation, no confusion, just a tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Neither of us spoke, but the silence said everything. I withdrew my hand quickly, my heart pounding in my chest. He didn't say a word, but his gaze lingered on me in a way that made my skin tingle. I turned away, closing my eyes and willing myself to fall back asleep. But sleep didn't come, not for either of us. The next day, I avoided him as much as I could. I kept busy helping my sister, but every time I caught a glimpse of him, my heart skipped a beat. He acted normal, maybe a little too normal. Was it all in my head? Was I imagining the way he'd looked at me? That evening, as we sat down for dinner, the tension was unbearable. My sister chatted away, oblivious to the undercurrent of unspoken emotions between us. I caught his eyes across the table once, and the intensity there nearly made me drop my fork. I excused myself early, retreating to the safety of the room. But safety was the last thing I found. He came in shortly after, closing the door behind him. My heart raced as he sat down on the mattress, his eyes never leaving mine. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and steady. I nodded, unable to form words. He spoke about the tension, about how he'd felt it too. He admitted that he didn't understand it, but he couldn't ignore it. His honesty disarmed me, and before I knew it, I was confessing my own feelings. It was as if a dam had burst, and everything I'd been holding back came rushing out. We promised to keep our distance, to let it go. But promises are fragile, and the pull between us was too strong. That night, as we lay in the dark, the silence was deafening. I could hear his breathing, feel his presence, and the air between us was electric.